Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We are going to hear a little talk by a man who is really a local treasure here in the Seattle community. He is a philosopher and has, like many philosophers do, strayed into all kinds of interesting related areas and has moved into college of built environment. So architecture, urban planning, landscape architecture. This is a man who has interests in geography, in community and politics, in questions of placemaking. How do you make urban places that are alive, urban culture? In philosophy, he's worked in phenomenology and post-structuralism. And we in the philosophy department are great admirers of his work on Martin Heidegger, which is very rigorous, very challenging work that he's done in that area. And Heidegger, as you may know, was one of those philosophers who had a big influence in the world of architecture as well. He also works in areas of ecology, sustainability, green architecture, technology, urban ethics, engineering, and environment, and he just won't stop. And so when I had the idea, I've really been wanting to do it for a long time, is to get him here to talk to us. We had the idea of thinking about how could we invite an audience that might tap into what he's doing from a variety of different angles. So I'm teaching a course this term that includes a section on urban ethics. So brought our students who have this interest in urban affairs, but we also were thinking about what people are doing in biology and engineering and law, all these areas. And we're thinking about a topic that could perhaps speak to a variety of people there. So we settled on this title of Eco-Engineering and Urban Water, the Ethics of Environmental Transformation. And water, of course, as you know, is very important. We have it running all through our bodies and all around us. And it's something that's very important for us to connect with academically and intellectually as well. So I hope you will join me in welcoming Dr. Robert Mugerauer.
Skills are not doing anything, well, you know, that's okay. You have a mid-career measuring curve heights and you won't harm them. But if you're good, like Paul tells me you are, then you're dangerous. Okay? Because then you're going to be shaping the world that we all have to live in. So then you'll be, you know, head of housing for San Francisco, or in charge of the U.S. Scandinavian environmental project to use more wood without damaging the world. So the better you are, the more your career success is going to be important. So I'm supposed to worry about you, Paul says. You're good. So I'm going to cover a wide variety of topics that hopefully, on the one hand, will be stimulating to everybody, and if it's aggravating, it'll be just minimally so you'll have tomatoes or some good comments to respond to at the end. So this is the kind of a combination, as Paul says, of philosophical reflection and the pragmatics of teaching in a professional school. There is a summary of the whole lecture, so I don't encourage you to go to sleep, but that's it. You've got people who like to build straight channels and canals to control water, and the river doesn't care. It's going to meander. Okay, so that's basically it. And then ethics, I want to point out, I'm sure you're reading from Paul's class too, kind of following the Aristotelian tradition. It's not ever just a personal just me, what should I do? Industry, you just dump it in the river, which we'll come back to with the Duwamish, because that's not anything to do. So I'm going to come back to the Duwamish toward the end, since that's our city. So I'll talk a little bit about that, but I'm mainly not talking about pollution. The bigger thing here is just the control of water. So for instance, we know that there's this giant competition for water in the American West. We had this strange idea, Turner and others, that it was a dry climate, but they had a serious idea that if we populated it, it would rain more. And that was one of the scientific bases at the time for settling the West. It didn't work out so well. We need more data. But, you know, we take the whole system and drain it into mainly Los Angeles, but other places. And so people downstream, if you need the novel Milagro bean field, you know, all of a sudden you're there trying to irrigate your crop in a modest way, and there's no water. It's all gone to Los Angeles or someplace else. And so that's back to, we like to build the channels. You know, get the rivers, put in some dams, channel the water on one hand to Los Angeles, because we got millions of people living in the desert where they shouldn't be. Count just Phoenix. But then, of course, it's agriculture, because I can't speak for Paul, but I like my lettuce and strawberries, and it's like, that's how you get them. You take the water away from the people in one place and put it someplace else so that we get fresh lettuce all year long. Okay, well, that's power, and of course, we're part of that dynamic. Or, even more desperate, as Paul says, oops, the issue in the future is really the privatization of water, which is a problem a little bit in the United States, but it's a huge problem in other parts of the world. I mean, there's fights in the U.S. about Nestle buying municipal water systems and then controlling those for beverage use. When I was in the hospital the other day, I got a little bottle of water. It's like, super purified water. And I look in the back and it's water from the Sacramento City water system. So they buy water from Sacramento, put it through a filter, and then sell it for $2 a bottle. Okay. So the control of water, like in some places, especially Africa and South America, really the water is privatized. People wind up having to pay money they don't have. It can be as much as rent to buy water, because somebody through the political complex of power has now controlled the municipal water supply, and they don't have it. So this is huge issues of social justice and equity. So I'm not going to talk about that, but there's this huge spread of problems that we could talk about. Backing out one step, it's not just the control of water, like this is mine and you can't have it, but controlling water in general. Certainly, in architecture, we know that water is a great enemy of buildings, but it's, as we've seen, it's part of the lesson to us that we barely can figure out that we're not bigger than nature. We can say whatever we want, but it's going to flood, we're going to have monsoons, hundreds of people are going to be killed. Like you just turn on the news and see what's going on in Mozambique and other places, or in Indonesia, having to have a tsunami. It's enormous. So, no, actually, you know, there's this incredibly powerful realm out there that we basically ignore. Part of the way we ignore it is boarding ourselves up in cities, but that doesn't entirely work either. So how do we control water just in a general sense? So right, fat finger bottoms. So, you know, it floods, and then we feel sorry for 2 days, and it's a call for help, and donate $6, and then 2 weeks later we forget because there's something else in the news. But it goes on. Or in our persistence, in our ignorance, you know, we build our beach houses because that's a nice place to be, and the hurricanes come through and wipe them out. Whether it's on the East Coast or in Texas, well, it's okay, we got federal flood insurance, so we'll just rebuild the sucker next year with more concrete rebar than ever before. Now we're not getting the message really here. Or in many parts of the world where it's even more, we certainly have the third world right here in Seattle, and everybody else. But in lots of parts of the world, the poorest population in the favelas, are on the worst pieces of land, the most dangerous. The sides of hills, the mountains, and Rio that are going to slide, or in other places, and riverbanks. Those riverbanks are sort of not totally claimed by anybody, and so the poor live there. And then the flood comes, and they're the ones who die and get washed away. So it's a huge issue of what we do, and you can't just let everybody fend for themselves, which is basically. So how do we deal with controlling the water itself? That's the big challenge. So I got kind of a series of approaches. So ethics, ethos is the way of life, the value system of a whole culture. So it includes ethics, but politics, the value system, religion, all the values that would make a culture what it is would be part of the ethos. And so the story, kind of tell today, is the story of both knowledge and action, both parts. And we have in the West, at least, the ethos that's been with us for a long time. I suppose it's using spears to kill mastodons, but as Sophocles says in the Antigone, that's who we are. We're weird. We just don't leave things alone. There's a bunch of big animals over there. We don't just leave them alone. Let's figure out how to put tents on nets and spears on them. We got to get those guys. So we have this somehow weird thing of conquering and taking over and controlling what's out there. And taking even the seas, no matter what the seas are, we're going to master that. And so in terms of general flooding, it's all over the world. And there's probably one Republican here, so even President Trump don't believe in climate change. But many of us do. It's flooding. The Netherlands, they know it's flooding. They've been putting their finger in the dike for a lot of years. And they've given up on that. It doesn't work. But we still have this sense of power and control. And so we do have engineers that accomplish amazing things. Okay? Whoa, how do we put up storm surge barriers? How do we do all these amazing ways to control? It has to be free most of the time, but we don't want floods at a certain time. So we get giant technological engineering to somehow save the day, which has been working, but is decreasingly working. So this is partly a story of technology and engineering, as well as our ethos attitude. Heidegger points out he doesn't see much distinction between science and technology. They're kind of extensions of each other. You're learning how to make a glass beaker yourself or how to use it. And so this idea of mastery and control is part of our culture. And we've got this tradition from the Greeks and Francis Bacon and Darwinism. It's competition of only the strongest are going to survive. It's too bad for everybody else. And so it's the idea that you use whatever that you can do, and Bacon that in the 1500s. It's knowledge and power. The updated version, of course, is Foucault, but that knowledge and power are probably the same thing. So Bacon really thought already that the whole purpose of science is to be able to technologically dominate it, to make it do what we want. So this attitude seems to me is a big, big thing to think about. So we have some examples. The River Thames, often we don't think of giant floods from rivers, but the Thames is a big deal. They're in the North Sea, and they get these incredible winds and storm surges. And the water comes up the Thames and floods London. So even though London is not exactly on the seashore, it's a huge problem for already densely settled urban area. So then the question is, well, how do we do this? Well, we need some control systems on the Thames. So here my engineering colleagues can explain how this works. I know 2 sentences about it, and I got some pictures, but it's not so simple. So go back and get 6 engineering degrees, and then you kind of figure out, okay, you've got these big devices that can snap open and shut. And you want to flow go out most of the time, but if you get a big surge, you can just close these down. Basically shut it down. It's like a dam with kind of open Dutch doors or something to it. So, but this is, we are incredibly clever and powerful, trying to figure out how to control the water. One of my favorite examples, my colleagues, Marina Alberti, a ecologist, is from Venice, and she says, well, everybody keeps their boots, their hip boots, because most of the time you can't go out without your boots, because the water is going to be up above your knees. And that's even without the cruise ships coming in with big surges. So this is a big, big project. And I haven't kept up with it in the last month or so, but it's highly controversial. Because the idea was, okay, you've got to stop the water before it gets to the outside of the roof. And so how do you do that? What you need is, okay, you've got to protect the city as it sinks, and you've got the lagoon. But what you have to do is stop the water from surging in there. Well, okay, let's really get serious about this, they say. What if we put this underway, this giant underwater structure with a gate that can raise, so that when the surge is coming, we can raise the gate and basically just hold it back. Well, a good idea, triple quotation marks, it hasn't been working, because as they've worked on this for quite a number of years, well, this doesn't exactly leave the seabed alone. So what happens underwater? How you build this? How the underwater, geology and ecology and everything works is incredibly disturbed when you do something like this. And it may not work anyway. So they work on it, they build a little bit, and it's protested, and it doesn't work, and then try over again. So I say, we're going to make this work. So I say, I'm going to update. But this is a pretty audacious thing. We're just going to hold all that water back from Venice. Now, the problem with that is two parts, back to knowledge and practice. One is our knowledge does not fully and accurately help us understand the situation. We understand a lot. You might say we understand a lot to be able to control things pretty well for several thousands of years, but also the way we understand it gets us in trouble. And that's part of the shift I want to talk about. And that based on that knowledge, which is, as Heidegger says, correct but not fully true, our practices don't really work. And we mess things up. We're all familiar with the ecological ideas. Mosquitoes are a bad thing, especially because they carry dengue and other kinds of bad diseases. So if we can kill those little suckers, it's going to be good for world health. So let's invent DDT and spray it all over and kill all the mosquitoes. Okay, but then we figure out, gee, the birds were eating the mosquitoes, and then there's pesticides, the DDT is in the water, and then there's water in the little fishes, and the birds eat the little fishes, and then the birds get sick, and their eggshells get thinner and thinner and thinner, and you don't have birds. And so the idea of eliminating the mosquitoes to make some things better leads to a bigger ecological disaster. So those are the lessons that I guess Rachel Carson has kind of focused on, that we do things we think we know what we're doing, but we don't. But of course then for those of us in architecture and planning, you still have to do something. And that's the same, I think, with social action. It's like, yeah, well, there's poverty and there's racism. Well, how about a 200-year study? That's not going to do it. Maybe we need the 200-year study to fully understand it. We can't. Bringing up Aristotle's phronesis, call the time to act. You have to take practical action using your best judgment of what you know. And so it's not to try and kill the mosquitoes. DDT was a bad, terrible, horrible set of people doing bad, horrible, terrible things. They thought they knew what they were doing, but they didn't. So part of what we see here is that the theory of knowledge and practice is to slow down, understand more. So we move to the second ethos that's emerging. So there's this big shift in Western culture. Part of it is a better appreciation of cultures in the rest of the world, an appreciation of Eastern cultures, of indigenous cultures. So it's partly learning from other ecosystems how they handle these things. But certainly, there's a shift that's going on for many people from our viewpoint of mastery and control and competing with everything to cooperation. So now we have ecologists that point out it's really just not true that the Darwinian view that it's the survival of the fittest that looks like competition, that that's actually not especially true. There are lots of cases of it, but it seems if we pay attention to ecology, that it's mainly the substantially morphing cooperation of things that enable the world to keep going. Somehow, the birds and the plants and the humidity and everything works together to form an ecological unit that can be successful. That's not competition to beat each other up. It's the how to form cooperative systems. So that's an ecological systems thinking. Wants to take that approach. And so these big shifts are, for instance, in knowledge that we've started to appreciate and adopt complexity theory and self-organization, where we appreciate in self-organization how the natural world does self-adapt to give us ecological wholes. And then we have to figure out to what extent are we part of self-organization. That's a puzzle that I pose to all my classes, or our classes pose to ourselves. Okay, we want, in some sense, biomimicry. We want to learn from nature how to do things. Okay? But that's, self-organization is the world organizing itself. So how do you do that as a planner or as a designer? And if you're planning it, that's not self-organization. If you're designing it, that's not self-organization. It's the opposite. So then this is big quandary. How do we learn from self-organizing systems how to do things in a more integrated, holistic way? That calls for a whole different understanding of what planning is, a whole different conception of what design is, and along with that, a whole different conception of what engineering is. So this is a big cultural shift that we are in the midst of. Attention and I remember, though, this is being fought because complexity theory makes the audacious claim that it's kind of the science of sciences. We can talk about that more later if you want. But it claims that it can account for all the regular classical science we have, but all sorts of other things that were too complicated and too interrelatedly dynamic to understand before. But the idea is that complexity and self-organization is looking at the underlying function and structure of things, not just say how they look. And then action, as I mentioned, needs to be incremental. So then Aristotle is coming back. It's interesting, Aristotle is coming back in planning and other areas, that we need to do things incrementally. So phronesis is, depending on how translated, prudence, I don't think does it very well, but something like practical wisdom, practical judgment based on experience. But back to the mosquito case, the idea is like, okay, we think we know something, what we need to do is to try it out on a small scale and then see what happens. So that's incremental, but it's also based then on practical experience. And again, it also includes an appreciation of indigenous knowledge and knowledge of other cultures that we typically dismiss as not knowledge. So it's trying to appreciate more what's there. And I pulled out, just so you know where I am, in ethics, depending on what Paul puts on your chest, I've got these classic theories. Aristotle, which is morphed into virtue ethics, and deontology with Kant and utilitarianism, and then the version of feminist ethics of care. Well, the deontology and utilitarianism are typically rule-based, principle-based ethical decisions. And that kind of comes along with the Enlightenment. We need rules for action. Kant says they have to be universalized. Well, this is pushing those, not denying them or saying they're unhelpful, but pushing them a little to the side and saying, no, it's really the constant practice of cultivating who we are in the more ethical, political sympathy with each other and with the world. So virtue ethics and ethics of care, back to phronesis, practical knowledge, but that is grounded in things. It's not arbitrary.
if you have a good doctor, you have a bad doctor, you walk in and go, yeah, it's boring. You get a blood test and say, well, take 12 more pathology. That doesn't work very well. You normally resent it. That's very different than having a physician who's got a track record with, who knows who you are, and says, yes, as one of my doctors, myself is a great example, and doctors are always training new people. The new person comes in and says, ooh, your magnesium is really wrong. We need to get more magnesium in your system. And then the doctor who's known me a long time comes in and says, okay, now let's look at Bob's records. He's had a strange magnesium-calcium imbalance for 30 years, and it doesn't make any difference. That level of calcium and magnesium is perfectly fine. That's quite different than you just take a scientific norm and apply it universally. So this is saying you don't have such universal applications. Now, focusing back on the water, one of the big topics is resilience. Two crucial terms are resilience and transformation. So out of self-organization comes the idea that systems are dynamic. They're not just sort of continually repeating the same thing. That systems are dynamic and they have their own way of operating, whether we understand it or not. And so dynamic systems, by and large, have the capacity to reorganize themselves after some sort of disturbance. So you're sick, you get a fever, not enormously terrible, well then 2 days or a week later, your body is adjusted again. Okay? Or this is not me, but I hear people really exercise, sometimes too much in a hot day. Okay, if you do that, then you sweat a lot. And if you don't get the clue when you stop, then you get, heat exhaustion. Okay, but put you in the shade, give you some water, and then your body readjusts. Even the sweating and everything else is your body's attempt to reorganize itself to keep you in a stable condition. So nature's pretty good at that, if we learn how to do it. So in self-organization, then the idea is that we have these complex adaptive systems that self-adapt, that they have often the capacity, after a disturbance of some sort, to return to some sort of prior stable state. Say in the Hurricane Katrina, when we messed up by mismanaging the water, wetlands, but theoretically that can come back, and the balance of salt water and fresh water can come back. It's not too bad. If we look at rivers, back to what I was saying, rivers are going to do what rivers do. Well, that's what rivers do. They meander around. So that's what they do. The meander is the most efficient way that water finds to move across a landscape. So the question is then, well, can we, thinking this way, find a way to let that, like my initial slide, to let the water do what it wants? So these complex self-organizing systems have three possibilities, logically. One is they are able to reorganize themselves, in which case the basic stable state that has been there gets resumed and the system continues. Or it can fail to do so. And when the system doesn't reorganize, it dissipates, it dies. My heat stroke do me in. So, and that's the same with ecological systems. Sometimes they just die. They just can't be organized. Or a third possibility is that they can shift across a certain threshold to an alternative possible stable state. Most of our nature has multiple possible stable states. Not so clear about people, but if we look at, often it's saying the change from a wetland to a damp meadow, a change from damp meadow to a regular meadow, a change from a regular meadow to a woodland. There are these shifts to a different kind of thing. And sometimes this is one that was a happy, thriving system, and then it died off. So there are stable states that aren't good, like death. Okay. But hopefully you can find a stable state that's a different stable state that still you can thrive in a different mode. So then we come, watching the clock, my left eye here, the differences of approach. The classic approach, and I've got footnotes on this because engineering gets a bad rap from a lot of ecologists. So I'm distinguishing different kinds of engineering. The engineering one is basically trying to do resilience. It's trying to get things to be resilient and keep their states by preserving the optimal best condition. The ecologist Holland says that. But if you think of a good example, I didn't think of a slide at the time, of a forest fires. We think a great forest has this kind of peak condition when the trees are just sort of their full maturity. Well, this kind of engineering attitude, in footnote, wants to keep it that way. So we don't let the forest burn. We want to keep it in this peak condition. Well, the problem is that, as I say, it doesn't work. So we keep it in peak conditions, let the water flow, get rid of it. Okay? We put it in a channel and get it out. So that kind of control to keep it in the same situation doesn't really work. The alternative is ecological resilience, which is not just keeping the way it looks at its peak that we like, but has the goal of maintaining what's underneath that. The underlying dynamic, the generative processes that make the stream or the body or the society or whatever it is work. So it's not how it looks, it's what's working. So it's not that you have to keep the forest at its prime. At times it's going to burn, and then it goes through its own regenerative cycle. And the job then of planning, and design, and engineering, we would say, is to keep that dynamic healthy. And that's sort of its prime, pristine, mega thing that we like to keep. And then right now there's been a drought and global warming, and some places the boats can't even get through. So, but of course, in the regular model, we want this. So we're going to control it to that. And sometimes the most you can do is kind of heavy-duty engineering. So I have to be thrilled when they were having this, all of a sudden in the middle of the afternoon, there's sirens and trucks pulling up, and I'm told by a man in a uniform to get away from there, and the trucks pull up, and they've got tons of concrete slabs, and they have an exercise from whatever it was, 4 in the afternoon till 4 in the morning. How fast can we put up these barriers along the water? And so they drill. They also have a huge underground reservoir system, but they drill to put them up as fast as they can. And they got those up just in time. And so that's maybe the best we can do in some places. But other places, we should be able to do better. And so switching from that hardcore first controlling engineering to a second kind of engineering, second kind of resilience, we've got Munich, the Istar River. And the Istar River also has its calm summer days and its winter storms. But the idea there was, in fact, ecological resilience by, as the Dutch have a whole movement, make room for the river. The river is going to do what river is going to do, even in cities. Make room for the river. So even in Munich, they basically widened the shore. Instead of getting the river channelized so it goes one place real fast, the thing is, no, let it spread out. Okay, that's not land you're supposed to build on. Let it spread out, and the river will slow down. That's the way to control it. And of course, in the meantime, that gives you recreational spaces. People like to go and camp on the river and have picnics on the river, but that's all a floodplain. Instead of saying we're going to put it in a big sewer underground. So it's recovering really the way that Istar can live with society. There's also ecological modifications that we can make. We're familiar in Seattle with berms. Don't let the stormwater run straight off into the sound. So filter it, modulate it, make it slow down. Or in Berlin, in Potsdamer Platz, they've got the new super buildings that have underground storage cisterns and then a pond up at the top, which gives it kind of a nice urban respite. But the whole system is designed to kind of control its own water. It's kind of beyond being loose. It's been criticized, well, that's not going to work for the whole city. Well, hey, We're showing you can do something in the middle of a hyper-built city if you want to. That brings us to the new engineering, which is engineering 2, which is not just make it bigger and heavier. Bigger and heavier, I don't know, 2 minutes over, but I'll go fast.
Don't worry, keep.
Okay. The old system was, you got to have a bridge, because you want the train to go across the highway without killing as many people as it used to. Okay? And you're not quite sure what the specs are. So we know basically what will hold it up. So what we did in the 20s and 30s and whatever, let's build it 3 times stronger than it's going to have to be. Satisfies it, called the engineering. If we build it 3 times stronger, with 3 times as much concrete, with 3 times as much steel, that sucker's not going to fail. That's right. When we work Life Without Humans, we're not going to be here. Cockroaches will be the size of Volkswagens, and those bridges will still be there. Okay, good. But the whole approach to new engineering is light, flexible, how you can do the same thing with different, more high-tech materials, less waste. So that's a whole different engineering approach, a whole different engineering attitude. It's an attitudinal change, it's a change in materials, it's a change in the ability to use computation. So if we go back to Berlin, and Potsdamer Platz, one of the most famous building complexes there, they're using high-tech to do a very old idea. The idea of wind chimneys from the Middle East is thousands of years old. So if the hot air is evacuated up and gotten rid of, well, they've got the whole building in the atrium, but also in the walls, the double skin wall, so that the air can circulate up. And so the whole building is able to much more control its heat. And so it needs actually much more modest heating, even in Berlin's winters, and nothing in the summer by way of air conditioning to speak of. So it's used a high technology, double skin technology, more sophisticated sense of airflow to use new materials, new approaches to make it work better. Now, some of this, just as in the case of adapting a wind chimney, is using the ecotech for old vernacular ideas. So when I worked with one of my students, Gui-Sen, who came to do her degree because her hometown in China kept flooding, and she wanted to do something about it. Sweet person. She was just about done with her PhD and said, maybe I should also get a PhD in hydrology. It's like, no, you got enough. So among the ideas we came up with is, one was simple. What if we have buildings that are convertible? And so we were used to building buildings on pilates, but it'd be simple enough to have a building with the ground, with the walls that simply come up. We did a lot of research in vernacular. That was a typical way of dealing with floods in the U.S. Southeast. You have a barn, and you put your farm machinery on the ground floor, and when it came to flood, you moved all the machinery up to a higher hill and let the water go through. Well, there's no reason why you can't do that with a Starbucks. Okay? You have the Starbucks down there, you lift the whole walls up hydraulically, you let the water run through, you take out your two $8,000 espresso machines, and you put them back in. Well, that's an interesting idea. Glenn Merkin, an Australian architect, does that with his buildings in the outback. Australia is famous for these grass fires. When the grass gets dry, the fires just sweep across, woof. Well, that's not good for houses. But Merkin solves it relatively elegantly. You raise the house and have quadruple, quintuple, extra heavy, fireproofing on the bottom. And you let the fire go through. It goes through in 10, 15 minutes. Okay, fine. Nothing wrong with having a raised house, and you just don't have to worry about it. You let the fire go. Or in Amsterdam, they're experimenting with floating houses. So these are amphibious houses that are designed to rise and fall with the water. So when it's going to flood, fine, make them. Well, we have houseboats here in Seattle, right? So this is making more houses into houseboats when the occasion be made. Or the other brain idea from Bob's feverish brain,
Well, we've got a regular building that takes water. So what if we used some new biomaterials to actually be able to deal with that? I don't know most of you personally, but I would guess at least 4 of you, under your kitchen sink, have a sponge that is like a rock. That you bought a pack of 3 sponges, and you used one and that kind of got crummy, but you didn't throw it away, so you put it under the sink. And now it's like a rock. But if you put it in water, it softens up. Well, I don't exactly have a solution for this, but that would be the idea. You'd have material that could absorb water when the water is there, and then when the water evaporates, it would still be strong enough, like that sponge, to hold the building up. And of course, there's this whole realm, I was talking to our colleagues here, of biomaterials, nano biomaterials. That's just amazing. And my classes excavate these things by psyllium. Mushrooms. Mushrooms are becoming an interesting source of building materials. Because you can get the fibers and you can mold them any way you want. Because you can get a mold and get mushrooms to grow there. And then you dry the things out and you're left with a series of very hard fibers. You drop things on it and they're much more shock absorbent than a concrete block is. And so they build blocks out of these. They build buildings out of them. So you can get actual, regular, good building materials out of mushrooms. So that's kind of like the image I have in mind. Let's get mushroom walls. Some of this is not exactly developed, and some of it is at the point where people are starting to make big money. So, last point, last slide. Last 2 slides. Okay, so suppose we, in resilience, go from bare knuckle, bigger, heavier, which doesn't work, to something that's lighter, more flexible, that bends to nature. That's what the Eastern regions have been telling us for a long time. Suppose we do that. That's a major ecological solution or approach. But there's more to this because the ethics is a big social thing, a big political thing. There are problems with resilience. So in this sense, resilience is good, but it's probably not enough. So we've got New Orleans. So resilience would say, just like getting the forest back to all the prime trees or the Rhine back to its beautiful condition, we want New Orleans to be rebuilt to its pride. Or do we? Do we want to return New Orleans really to the way it was before Katrina? And there's some nice big houses that weren't bothered very much. But what about racial justice? What about the fact that there's huge disparities that are going to, where people are poor and they're going to flood again? So if you raise issues of social justice, health and well-being, there's a good reason to think after this, it's not a time to rebuild it just the way it was, with all its social, economic, unethical, unjust dimensions. We need to take the occasion to transform it. Well, what does that mean and how? Well, okay, that's why you have Paul teaching and your head on urban ethics. What are we supposed to do? But that's not saying how should Bob act? Should I use plastic or paper? It's saying how shall we form ourselves to a more just society, a more equitable society, one that's also functional and spreads the resources out. Those are the big questions behind this. Not just we have some people with big ideas that can use muscle and strength and steel to protect their property, but what do we do for the whole city? So last 2 images, bring it on home, the Duwamish. Okay, the Duwamish is our own beloved super fun site. We got our own. Okay, it started off well enough, became farms, and then became hyper manufacturing for Boeing and Ford and other companies. So now we got the Duwamish. It's a super fun site. Government's been working on it. The final conclusion is that the water is never going to be recoverable. Period. My colleagues and I did a study with Dr. Daniels and ACE student,
working on a PhD, and I'm up, did the health impact assessment. The water is never going to be clean and usable. It's never, ever, ever, ever going to be drinkable. You're never, ever, ever going to be able to eat anything that is on the bottom feeding fish or a clam or a mussel. The EPA, that's it. We've done as much cleaning of the water as is going to happen. So Bill Daniels from Public Health says the public health issue is not to make clean water. That's not going to happen anymore. That's as clean as it gets. Okay? So what do we do with this? Well, then that's this whole question. How shall we don't want to rebuild it to the prime of manufacturing madness, but we need other things. People need jobs. And so the report says, well, if we take well-being as a real issue, like the World UN Millennial Ecosystem Assessment says, we need these at least 5 things to have health and well-being. Security, good health, good social relations, material enough for a good life, and freedom of choice and action, which by and large is what most of the people in South Park, for instance, don't have. If we look at the statistics, South Park compared to the county average, unemployment is 50% higher. 78% of the children get subsidized lunches. Heart disease is 47% higher. You die 8 years before. Childhood, twice as much as the county average. Lung cancer, diabetes, and deaths from stroke are all higher. Environmental exposures to everything are among the highest. So why would we want to regenerate, in that sense, the area as it's been? It needs to be transformed. But then, now what? Well, that's why I say, okay, I only got another 50 years to figure this out. But you guys, that's your job. And of course, this is made worse because now it's gentrified. Now, instead of being a poor person with terrible disease and 3 children with asthma, now somebody next door has just sold their house to a developer for a lot of money. So you're not even going to be able to live in these bad conditions. I had a good fight with one of my, it was a polite fight, with my real estate colleagues, because I thought I'd better identify myself. He came out of the elevator one day and said, what are you doing? I said, oh, I've got my class working on the Duwamish and well-being. He said, oh, I was at a meeting of real estate people downtown talking about South Park. He said, they said it's ripe for the picking. It's ripe for the picking. Buy it. So my class came up with one of the other solutions. No trolley. We wanted to make it hard to get in and out. A trolley is going to kill it. Right? We want to make it nice, but not too good. Not enough to really attract people who want a different kind of life. So, development without displacement. How do we do that? Well, I talked this over, but that's it. So you should have some questions.